All right, two quantities, quantity A and quantity B. Let's start with quantity A, right? I have quantity A, it's this right here, right? And I'm gonna measure quantity A using halves, and then I'm gonna measure this quantity using eighths, right? Let's do it. Right, when I measure this quantity using halves, you can see that there are two of them, right? I can measure this quantity using two halves. Now, before I get to the eighths, right, what we know is we know that halves are 4 times as big as eighths. So I'm gonna write that here. Because 1/2 is 4 times as big as 1/8, right? What it means is that if I measure this same quantity using eighths, I'm going to need 4 times as many eighths. So if a quantity can be measured using 2 halves, then it can be measured using 8 eighths. So in other words, because 1/2 is 4 times as big as 1/8, it will take 4 times as many eighths. I'm going to erase this B. To measure the same quantity. Right? Cool. And it works in reverse as well, right? Let's say I started with eighths, right? It would take me 8 eighths to measure this quantity. Right? Because I know that 1/8 is 1/4 of 1/2, it would take me, or take 1/4 as many halves to measure the same quantity. Right? So it's two relationships going on here. Right? If I'm starting with halves and I'm measuring now using eighths, it's going to take me 4 times as many. Right? If I'm starting with eighths and then I'm measuring with halves, it's going to take me 1/4 as many. Now let's move on to quantity B, and let's measure quantity B using 6. Right? If I measure quantity B using 6, you'll see that there's 4 of them. Right? What if I was to measure quantity B using 12ths? Well, I know that for every 6, there's 2 12ths. Why is that the case? That's the case because 1/6 is twice as big as 1/12. So anytime I measure a quantity in 6, I'll already know how many 12ths it would take to measure the same quantity. All I need to do is multiply by 2. So if it's going to take me 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, that means it's going to take me 8 12ths, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this time we have 4, 6. And we see that, right? It's double. It would take me 8 12ths. Okay? What if I was to measure that quantity using thirds instead of 12ths? If you notice, it's taking me half as many thirds. Why is that? Because 1/3 is twice as much as 1/6. So I'm only going to, this is bigger. So I'm only going to need half the amount. So where we have 4/6, it's only going to take me half as many thirds, which is 2/3.